You know, when you pick up a copy of Shakespeare, it just feels so permanent, doesn't it? Like it was carved in stone from day one. But the truth is, the plays we read today have this hidden, kind of messy, and absolutely fascinating history. And well, that's the story we're going to dig into right now.
It all really boils down to this one big question. When you're reading Hamlet or The Tempest, whose words are you actually reading? Believe me, the answer is way more complicated and a whole lot more interesting than you probably think. This is a real-deal literary detective story. So let's start with the heart of the problem, the central mystery of our case, the legacy that Shakespeare himself left behind. And here it is, our first major clue. And it's a bit of a shocker. William Shakespeare never published a single one of his plays, not one. To him, they weren't exactly literature, they were scripts. The copyright? That belonged to his theater company. He never went back to collect them, never prepared some final polished edition for the world. He just didn't. And this is where the problem really hits home. Shakespeare dies in 1616, and for 7 whole years, his legacy is just hanging by a thread. His plays only exist as these scattered, inconsistent scripts and some pirated copies. It wasn't until 1623 that 2 of his friends and fellow actors, John Hemmings and Henry Condell, gathered up everything they could find and published the first folio. And thank goodness they did, because they saved 18 plays that otherwise would have been lost forever. Just go.
So, what were those original manuscripts even like? Well, Shakespeare's great rival Ben Jonson gives us a pretty good clue. He said he remembered the actors bragging that Shakespeare wrote so fast and so clean that he never blotted out a line. Jonson's snappy comeback? Would he had blotted 1,000. You can just hear the sass, right? But it tells us something crucial. Shakespeare was writing at top speed for performance, not for posterity. And that left a pretty messy trail for anyone trying to piece it all together later.
And that brings us to what you might call the crime scene, this jumble of evidence that editors have been trying to sort through for the last 400 years. Okay, so think of the evidence like witness testimony in a trial. The first folio, that's like the main case file, but it was compiled from a whole bunch of different sources, some better than others. Then you have the good quartos. These are like your reliable eyewitness accounts. Pretty solid stuff. But the bad quartos? Oh man, that's pure hearsay. We're talking pirated copies, probably written down from memory by actors trying to make a quick buck. They are riddled with errors. So with all this conflicting evidence, how on earth do modern-day detectives sort through the mess to get to the truth? Well, they've got a very special toolkit. This modern toolkit has 3 main instruments. First up, you've got bibliographical analysis. This is where they study the physical printed book itself, the paper, the layout, the typos, for forensic clues about the manuscript it was based on. Second, there's punctuation forensics, which is so cool. It's about realizing the original punctuation wasn't about grammar, it was a guide for performance. And third, handwriting analysis, getting right inside Shakespeare's own messy handwriting to understand his common mistakes. Now, one of the most important clues they look for is evidence of a prompt copy. This wasn't some pristine book. This was the master script used in the theater, probably Shakespeare's own draft, all covered in stage directions, notes, and cuts. This is huge because it means scholars aren't just reading a text. They're trying to reconstruct a live, breathing, working document. It's like looking over his shoulder. And get this, just look at the punctuation. In this line from The Tempest, the original colons and commas aren't about grammar at all. They're basically stage directions for the actor. A colon means a long pause, a comma, a short one. It's a dramatic roadmap baked right into the text. The modern grammatically correct punctuation, it completely loses all of those vital performance clues. The absolute biggest breakthrough for handwriting analysis came from this right here. 3 pages of a manuscript for a play called Sir Thomas More. Why is this so important? Because scholars have identified this as being in Shakespeare's own hand. This is our Rosetta Stone. For the first time, we could see exactly how he formed his letters, how he wrote when he was in a hurry, and what kinds of mistakes he was most likely to make.
And that manuscript revealed all his little handwriting quirks. He'd jumble up letters like M and N, his A often looked like a U, his E and D were almost identical, just different sizes.
Now, these aren't just random typos, they're predictable patterns. They allow modern detectives to look at a word in the printed text that makes no sense and actually reverse engineer what Shakespeare's messy scrawl must have originally said. It's brilliant. All right, so let's put this whole detective toolkit to work. Let's apply it to one of Shakespeare's most famous and mysterious plays. The text of The Tempest in the First Folio is just full of these forensic clues that it was heavily altered. For one, it's one of the shortest plays, which suggests it was cut down, probably for a special performance. It's also full of these broken, jagged verse lines, a sure sign of cuts and revisions. That beautiful mask scene in Act 4, it feels tacked on and was probably added for a royal wedding. And you even have these ghost characters, like Antonio's son, who get mentioned but never show up, like remnants of an earlier version of the play. And here's the bombshell. The experts who study this conclude that one of the most iconic speeches in all of literature, Prospero's "Our revels now are ended," is actually, quote, dramatically inappropriate where it appears. It seems it was this gorgeous piece of writing, but it was just sort of clumsily stitched into the play, likely for that one special occasion. Wow. So after all this detective work, what does it all mean? What's the big takeaway? It means that Shakespeare's plays aren't these perfect, untouchable monuments carved in stone. That's a really romantic idea for sure, but it's just not the reality. The reality is they are living, breathing scripts. They were shaped by the practical demands of performance, they were constantly being revised and cut, and they were finally pieced together years later from the best, messiest evidence that was available. And you know, that means the scholarly edition you hold in your hand is something pretty special. It's not just a reprint, it's a modern detective's report. Every single punctuation mark, every word choice, it's an argument. It's based on all the available clues for what Shakespeare and his company might have intended. So when you read it, you're basically following the investigation. And all this brings us to one last thought. We tend to take the printed classics on our shelves for granted, assuming they're fixed and final. But if even Shakespeare's texts have such a dramatic, messy, secret history, well, it makes you wonder, doesn't it? What other perfect classics out there are hiding a story just waiting to be uncovered?